Number first, I thank my colleagues, honorable council members, Papa Corin and Sylvia. I apologize, I'm running a little late today. Okay, so there's several items in the agenda. Items 1 we'll call special, the cards that are in place. Item 2 has cards. Item 3 has cards. Item 4, we can see no cards. If we're okay with my colleagues, we can move that one on consent. Do I have a first or number 4? So moved. Thank you, sir. And that's a yes, sir? Yeah. Okay, so we move that item. Item 5 has cards. Item 6, I think, is they're working on cards. All right. So, and 7 as well. Roberto, leave anything out?
I don't know if there's a director's report.
Director's not here?
No.
Okay. Well, I appreciate Alan being here. Thank you, sir. So he doesn't have much to report? Nothing's happening in the planning department? Is that we interpret this gesture of absence? Alan Bell's a wise man. He says nothing. Okay. All right. I'm sure there's a lot happening in the planning department. Okay, so Roberto, we have no director and 1 consent that we approved. So that should take us to item number 1.
Yes, it's item 1 is a draft ordinance prepared by the planning department. It's a proposal to regulate solar energy systems in the city.
Okay, we have staff. Good afternoon, ma'am.
Good afternoon, council members. Deborah Cahan, Planning Department staff. Today I'm going to speak about the solar zoning ordinance. This is one piece of a larger interdepartmental effort. So what I'm talking about today is strictly has to do with the zoning code, but there are other pieces together that ultimately are aimed towards streamlining the process of installing structures that support solar energy systems while maintaining respect for the surrounding communities. I'd like to clarify that what I'm talking about when I mention solar structures are structures that solely support the solar energy system. And the reason why I'm distinguishing the two is because local municipalities are preempted from regulating solar energy systems per state law. So there are 4 components to this ordinance. The first concerns existing surface parking lots. When a property owner wishes to install carports that host solar energy systems, they will become non-compliant with stall size once the posts are installed into the parking spaces. In order to avoid applicants from seeking a variance from the Department of City Planning, we are proposing that an exemption be granted for such instances so that posts supporting solar energy systems in parking spaces can occupy up to 10 inches of the parking stall if they are located at the head of the parking space, in other words, furthest from the drive aisle, and in the corners, so that they do not obstruct pedestrian and vehicular access. Secondly, and consequentially, we are also proposing a waiver related to parking spaces. The reason for this is when there are any improvements made on a surface parking lot, the parking lot must meet current state requirements for disabled parking stalls. Disabled parking stalls can be larger than a non-disabled parking stall. Therefore, depending on the size of the parking lot, there may be a net loss of 1 or a few parking spaces. So we are proposing that these be waived when improvements are made to this parking lot. And what I mean by waived is that the number of parking spaces will be considered compliant post meeting disabled access laws. Thirdly, we're going to talk about the roof height of solar structures. Currently, solar structures can go between the height of the roof and up until the height limit. There's also an exception in the zoning code to go an additional 5 feet above the height limit if a 5-foot setback is provided. We are proposing that, given the special nature of solar structures and their functional relationship to height, that we pull out solar structures from that grouping and limit them instead to only rise 15 feet above a building roof level when the roof is flat, and 3 feet on all other roofs. It's very important to note that 15 feet in the R1 zones will only be granted in the case that this structure is shading a habitable area or a carport, which can be the case in hillside areas. Okay, and lastly, the fourth component has to do with required open space. So the zoning code requires that all open space as required per the zoning code be open to the sky. And we are proposing that up to 25% of that space can be covered when it is a structure that supports these solar energy systems. And that concludes the presentation.
Okay, so we have, we're codifying the structural elements that hold up the system, but not the system itself.
Correct.
Okay, so issues regarding power and energy and the grid are all different subjects, different issues not pertaining to this action.
Yes, however, they have been addressed because we've been working in an interdepartmental task force. So this working group has vetted out our own individual efforts with each other to make sure that we're all aware and can handle the processes related departments are undergoing. So
this is one step of many other steps that will be coming forward.
Correct.
Great. And just one question regarding the interpretation that the panels are subject to lot coverage requirements. Has this occurred already?
So what you're referring to is part of the larger process that we are undergoing. And what we are seeking to do is clarify that in hillside areas, solar structures are considered the same as structures, and as such are subject to the hillside ordinance. That is something that we have drafted and that we are in the process of officially disseminating from the department. Okay. And this notification will be internally distributed as well as to the Department of Building and Safety so that regulations are enforced consistently.
Great. We do have some speaker cards with colleagues. Any questions for our presenter? Okay. So we'll have one speaker card. We have Mr. Barry Johnson. Good afternoon, sir.
Barry Johnson, Studio City stakeholder. In Studio City, we've fought to keep parking spots wherever possible. In fact, many times we've been successful in getting more where parking lots have been erected. And this, for me, just raises the red flag anytime we're talking about having less parking spots or making the incredibly small spots that we already have even smaller. So I'd really like some clarification. I don't understand why posts supporting a roof have to take away from parking spaces if the posts are going in between this much space that you have between each parking spot on either side. So it'd be nice to get some further clarification. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Johnson. And I don't see any other cards on this side. Any other questions from my colleagues? Please.
Actually, my question was sort of related to what Mr. Johnson raised, which is, we've all seen this encroachment of more and more compact car parking spaces, which in many lots turn out to be largely non-functional and end up becoming a way that more parking stalls are counted when in fact they're not really utilizable. And my concern is that if we already have those small spaces and then we're encroaching further into the usable parking space of a compact space, that it's really not realistic to consider that a parking space anymore. It makes sense to me that in an existing lot that's already been planned, and now a property owner wants to add a solar energy system, makes sense not to have to go through all the loops of a variance. But what about a new lot where they're planning the number of spaces to accommodate the development, they're planning to put the solar energy system in as part of that development? Do you differentiate between that situation and the existing lot in which the number of spaces have already been calculated, number one? And then number two, can you speak a little bit to the point raised by Mr. Johnson as to the actual engineering needs to encroach into the space as opposed to leaving posts in that space in between spaces?
Sure. Currently, as written, the draft ordinance does not distinguish between a new parking lot, new construction parking lot, and an existing parking lot. That can be accomplished. The draft ordinance could be modified to indicate that it would only apply to existing parking lots. To answer your first question. Regarding these existing spaces that are smaller, just to make sure we're on the same page, when you have a parking space, and this is the drive aisle behind it, just to clarify, we are requiring that the posts be installed on the interior, so furthest from the drive aisle, so the car would be where the car pulls in, and that these posts are on the corner, just so that you make sure, so that you know that they're pushed back, so they're not affecting the width of the stall, is what I mean to express. They are instead potentially impacting the length, and I say potentially because if the stall is wide enough or the car is narrow enough, you can still pull in all the way. So effectively, the worst case that would happen is that the car would be parked 10 inches further back, but again, the width would not change. That being said, the draft ordinance does not distinguish between compact stalls and and standard stall sizes. So if that's something that the committee is interested in pursuing, that is possible. Furthermore, going off of the good point regarding the space sizes between parking spaces we sometimes see, a lot of times older parking lots do not have this extra space in them, so we can't always use that as a baseline measure.
So, Councilor, given the observations we're making, is there, would you like further investigation as to the distinguishing of different types of parking stalls, or how did you want to proceed with that?
No, I think that I wasn't suggesting that the types of stalls should be differentiated, just that it is an existing problem already that this would tend to compound. But I think in light of the location of the posts, as you've described, that satisfies me on that. I am still a little bit concerned about the application to future parking lots, because it seems to me that if this is going to be planned, you should plan around it. You should just design around this and add the necessary number of spots to accommodate the actual demand for spots, knowing that, yes, we're also going to be putting in a solar system. So I'd like to see a differentiation made. I think for the existing person who played the existing development where the lot was designed to accommodate demand, and then subsequently we're trying to add these systems, I don't want to discourage the construction of systems just because the person has, met the formula for parking spaces. But going forward, it seems to me they ought to be able to plan for that.
Okay.
Understood. And that actually was the intention, that it would be for existing parking lots, but that is a great point that is worth making that distinction, because current language does not make that.
if it's pragmatic to do that, that would be my preference.
Well, we do have one other card that came in, and we'll close public hearing after this. That's Mr. Will Wright. Let's come on in. So we're about to conclude this item.
Hi, Will Wright with AIA Los Angeles. Just short and sweet, we're here to represent our support. The planning department allowed some of our architects to look at this in advance. We went over the details, and we made specific recommendations that were implemented in this ordinance, and we're here to express our support, so thank you.
I do want to thank the task force for all the hard work. The different council offices have been participating. I know there's one step of many other steps, but at least for now, we're getting some traction and moving this policy. That being said, what we will do, council members, if you're in agreement, is request the city attorney to prepare the ordinance. Now, in preparation, the ordinance will come back to this body. Is that accurate?
I thought the ordinance
to establish this policy? It'll come back to this body, right? And how long would that take, more or less? Do we have any?
Well, I don't know. I'm not the one that'd be preparing it, but it looks like it's substantially done, so I wouldn't imagine it would take a long time.
30 days, maybe 60 days. Any indication from the staff when working with the city attorney's office have been with you?
I hesitate to give an actual number of days, but the city attorney's office has been working very closely with us, and they have indicated that it would be a quick turnaround.
Okay, so we're hopefully 30 days or so, but okay. All right, so we'll just keep this one moving. So we'll come back to committee, so we request the city attorney prepare the ordinance, and that will be the order of this committee.
Do you also want to add Mr. Krikorian's recommendation as to the parking stalls in that analysis?
That would be a very easy fix that we can easily address, that the exception for parking stall sizes be limited only to existing parking lots. Be happy to do that. It'd be easy.
Great, so we will do that. So that'll be the order of this committee.
So you're asking this to come back to council or to go to?
No, it goes to the city
It'll come
attorney.
back to, so we'll go to the city
Then it
attorney.
goes back to Plum.
It'll come back to committee.
To committee, okay.
Yeah. All right, so that'll be the order of this committee. Item number 2, Roberto.
Item 2, council members, is a status report as to a Nexus study that the planning department has conducted as it relates to the proposed USC specific plan.
Will staff come on up?
Good afternoon, Plum Committee. Jason Chan, Department of City Planning. We're here to present a status report on the USC Nexus study. The study was requested by the City Council in December of 2008 as an additional study tied to the USC specific plan. Today's update consists of a response to the comments received at the Plum status report of August 2nd of this year. At the original August meeting, the community provided testimony on the Nexus study, and as a result of this testimony, the Planning Committee requested City Planning return within 90 days to respond to the comments received and to see if additional mitigation or recommendations can be provided. For the past several months, we have been preparing today's update. Staff went back to the technical reports to clarify data conclusions and revisit the analyses contained within these documents. Our staff decided to approach these comments as a response similar to a response to EIR comments. In the style of an EIR response, we categorize the main concerns by topic, for example, housing and employment, and address these comments directly in turn with a response. Our official response was released on October 18th, and hence the public had 2 weeks to review our comments. I'd like to note that we are still actively engaging USC on specific plan and development agreement, and there will be numerous opportunities for public comment in the months to come. My colleague Debbie Lawrence will now provide detailed conclusions on the Nexus study.
Good afternoon, Debbie Lawrence, Department of City Planning. The responses to the comments are primarily based on data and analysis from various technical studies prepared by HRNA, a consulting firm hired by USC. The findings of these studies were included in the EIR's Appendix J, Employment, Housing, and Population Impacts Assessment, and were also integrated into the Nexus study. The responses generally cover the following issue areas: economic impacts on local small businesses, university support for these businesses, project jobs and wages, community access to the jobs, park acreage in the Nexus study area, and loss of Nexus study area market rate and affordable units. So I'm just going to give you a few of the key findings from our staff review. First, there was concern about the economic impacts on local businesses from introduction of the project commercial use, and that this might result in business closures. So for environmental analysis, this concept is studied as urban decay or the potential for significant business closures, abandonment, or other forms of physical deterioration. An urban decay study was prepared by HR&A, which evaluated the amount of commercial square feet that can be supported by demand and concluded that future demand will be large enough to support both the proposed project and existing businesses offering comparable products. Another issue had to do with concerns that the jobs might be poverty-level jobs. Staff reviewed the HR&A assessment of economic and fiscal impacts, and the study projected that 2,200 direct jobs in retail, hotel, lab school, and academic positions would be generated as a result of the project. The estimated annual wages in 2009 dollars for these jobs ranged from $21,000 for the service and retail jobs to $39,000 for the educational jobs provided at USC. About 90% of these jobs have wages above the city living wage, which was about $23,500 in 2009 dollars, and that was just used as a benchmark. The project will also generate an estimated 4,894 construction jobs, and the average annual wage for construction jobs in LA County in 2009 was $58,000. A large portion of the comments were related to housing demand and the loss of market rate and affordable units due to displacement by USC students. HR&A prepared a housing analysis that indicated about 896 units of rental housing in the local area are likely to be vacated by USC students and faculty by 2030 due to the construction of new housing as part of the project and other privately developed student housing projects. The project would provide 5,400 beds, which would help meet the needs of USC populations who now compete for space in the Nexus study area. The supply of housing in the local area will also increase between 2009 and 2030, which will help to reduce the price of housing. So in conclusion, staff believes that we have adequately responded to the comments made on August 2nd by revisiting the findings from various background studies and the Nexus study. Staff did not find any new impacts or mitigation beyond those already identified in the EIR and the Nexus study. The policies in the general plan framework and the Los Angeles Community Plan, which is currently being updated, address planning for and developing incentives to encourage production of an adequate supply of housing units of various types and prices, as well as the creation of jobs in the local area. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. We have several speaker cards on this item, and we'll begin with Mr. David Robinson. Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon, council members. My name is David Robinson. I work for SAGE, and I'm the coordinator of UNIDAD, the United Neighbors in Defense Against Displacement Coalition. And reluctantly, I must start my comments by registering UNIDAD's great disappointment with the draft response to comments on the Nexus study. In the written testimony I'm submitting today, I've detailed the reasons for this disappointment, but in the brief time allotted here, I can point out only a few things, and rather quickly. One is that, as with the Nexus study itself, the responses to public comments reveal an unmistakable bias toward USC, with the city designing its comments to defend USC's projects and programs rather than placing protection of the public's interests and needs first and foremost, particularly the most vulnerable segments of the public. The most egregious example is the authors citing USC's claim that there is anecdotal evidence to support one of their positions regarding housing. For more than a decade now, our local organizations and members have testified to the magnitude of the affordable housing crisis in the neighborhoods surrounding USC. And yet, until we conducted our own grassroots community research to document the displacement, We were told over and over again by the city and by USC that our claims were merely anecdotal and could not be a basis for public policy. And yet in the draft response, USC's assertion of admittedly anecdotal evidence supplied by USC is offered by the planning department as relevant and legitimate. The second point I wish to highlight is that the written testimony that Unidad and others submitted to Plum seems to have been largely ignored. Let me say that again. Our written testimony seems to have been largely ignored. I cannot overstate how frustrating that is. Indeed, it's the primary reason that the coalition decided to send only a few representatives today. We've grown extremely frustrated at expending our time, energy, and resources at opportunities for public input that turn out not to be fair or productive. That's why our major request in the letter I'm submitting is for a genuinely inclusive and transparent process from this point forward. And as part of that, and I hope you'll at least allow me to read this sentence, we urgently request joint meetings with the City Planning Department, USC, and the City's Housing Department in order to discuss the development agreement currently being drafted to accompany the USC-specific plan. We stand ready to partner with the City, with USC, and with other stakeholders. And I have our letter. I also have a letter about the small business points as well that detail the very detailed response. Will it be read? Yes, I have copies. I'm just hoping it'll actually be read this time.
Okay, thank you, sir. Okay, thank you, Mr. Robinson. We have with us Brian League. Come on up.
Good afternoon, Councilman Reyes and members of the Plum Committee. I'm Brian League with the University of Southern California. I just wanted to acknowledge and thank the Planning Department for their efforts on bringing the Nexus study to closure. It's been a long process. We think it's been a valuable process. And I also wanted to acknowledge Unidad and their suggestion that we begin an open process discussing project going forward. We're in full support of that, and we look forward with engaging in the public process in the months coming forward. Thank you.
Mr. League, in terms of time frames, there are concerns about how we work with the council offices of the district. Can you speak to that concern regarding input from the council office in regards to Councilman Park's office? Can you speak to your level of participation in working with his office on the Nexus study?
We fully want to engage the three council offices that the project impacts, and we started a conversation again with the planning department to begin the staff work, but it's our expectation that once we have a foundation of a template of the specific plan, the development agreement, that we bring in the different council offices and begin that process. And it's taken a while to get to the point where we're at, but I think we are now ready to begin that process completely.
Okay. We'll hold off on that. Thank you, Mr. League. Thank you, sir. I'd like to call up Privy Doshi from the Councilman Park's office. Good afternoon, ma'am.
Good afternoon, council members. We just wanted to, we've always been very supportive of USC projects, but on this particular report back, we feel that some more in-depth analysis is needed. We specifically asked for the Nexus study to look at a broader area than what the EIR covered, and this was supposed to provide a special needs assessment and a gap analysis to discuss things such as, police stations, schools, open space, and shortage of affordable housing. We don't feel that this document did that in the way we were kind of looking for. So we would like to request continuance, and hopefully the university can work with our office and as well as CD1 and CD9 on this.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, ma'am. I know when USC comes into the council, we have one of the strongest cheerleaders in Mr. Parks. So I know he's a strong advocate of USC as an institution. But in listening to the deputy and my understanding of Councilman Parks, he is asking this committee to hold this item here until we get to a place where they feel we are addressing their concerns and the priorities as stated in the Nexus study. And that's something that I think we need to honor as a colleague impacting his district. but I'll proceed with some instructions, but I'd like to hear from my colleagues first.
I would like the department to respond to some of the public comments made that some of the initial reports were not as fair as it was or not as balanced as it should be. Does the department have any response to that? I think the speaker cited one example of how some anecdotal evidence wasn't allowed, or with the displacement of housing was mentioned that that's anecdotal evidence, yet the university is providing anecdotal evidence on displacement of housing and that's being accepted. Or I think the gist of the comment as well was that generally the response from the planning department has been biased towards the university. I mean, any response to that?
What we did, we responded, we were directed to respond to the comments that were made on August 2nd and to revisit the Nexus study and the EIR, the mitigations. And what we did is there were three primary reports that were prepared by consultants prior as background technical reports, which addressed the economic aspects, the fiscal impacts, and the housing. There was a housing analysis done. So what we did is staff reviewed those technical reports as the basis for responding to the comments. The anecdotal evidence that was in there, we stated, it said according to USC, so that was clarified as a comment from them, not from us. But our responses primarily were based on these technical reports, which were included in Appendix J of the EIR. It consolidated all the technical studies because experts did these reports based on, we had economists in these firms, and so they did technical background analysis to support the Nexus study.
And so do you feel that the city's response has been fair and non-biased?
Based on the technical background reports, yes.
Okay. Well, it does seem to be a misunderstanding, I would suppose, then with the community group. I guess that needs to be corrected somehow so that the community group in the area doesn't feel like it's these responses by the city are in defense of the university or biased towards the university.
Good afternoon, Faisal Roble. We can understand why the members of the community would feel that we have some bias towards USC, because apparently that perception is there and we have to change that perception. However, with respect to the responses that we did to the specific issues, as Jason initially listed, we just approached this the same technical way that we approach with other comments that we receive from the public in hearings like this. Now, in order to address, there is one issue that we haven't addressed, and I will tell you what that issue is and why we haven't, and where we like to address that issue. But in general, we transcribed all the issues and we just wrote as form of comment and the most appropriate response that we have within the given time and the studies that are out there. So definitely from our point of view, the Nexus study is our Nexus study, not a USC. They may have been partners with us, but this is a city Nexus study. So if the council office does not feel it's adequate, then it's your prerogative. However, we try to exhaust within the short period of time to revise and review and go back to the source of the information that we have initially put out to you and see if we can come up with the most appropriate responses. One issue that we found out that we haven't addressed is somebody testified in front of you on the issue of pedestrian safety. And it's not that we ignored, but we feel that the environmental impact report addressed that. And we are also talking to that group to see if we can address some of those issues in the development agreement. So if that issue is raised, we don't intend to walk away from it. We will come back and address it either through the DA development agreement and bring that to you.
So there will be some additional opportunities for the community groups to participate in this process and see a draft of the final report? Or are you going to or do we issue a final Nexus study report without a draft?
Some of the issues that have been discussed in front of you, for instance, the issue of affordable housing, the issue of employment issues, all those are also being addressed in the development agreement. They have been raised as part of the process, and our solution to address those issues would be through the DA.
Will we issue a draft where people have an opportunity to comment on a draft, or do we issue a final?
Yes, Councilperson, the way we approach the development agreement is that at the initial stage of the process, we engaged groups that included the council offices, UNIDAD, several stakeholders in the community to the tune of 20 meetings. We came up with a shell document that's in the form of matrix, and that matrix has been sitting for a while with SC without any movement. Now we see some movement where dollar amounts are being populated in those matrices. One is we feel comfortable, and that's in the near future, not that in the distant. We'll come to the council offices first, which is probably as soon as next week, and also go back to some of the major stakeholders and see how we can vet the development agreement with some dollar amount being populated with the boxes. Yes.
Okay, thank you.
When I look at the letter from UNIDAD and I look at the second page, have you had the chance to see this letter?
No, I just...
Do you have one in front of you? Can we get him a copy of that? You look at the bullets that are addressed, and I just want to follow the line of question that's being raised by my colleague is there's a section that says, for instance, the following issue areas were left unaddressed or inadequately addressed in the city's draft response. And I go through these bullets.
The affordability levels, analysis of the number of beds USC plans to create. I think all those issues have been addressed in the report that we circulated on the 18th of October. The question is a question of interpretation. Yes, we addressed that in our responses.
I'm sorry, you're addressing it when?
We addressed these issues, a question of in terms of say the affordability issue. Yes, we did. The memo
this letter contradicts that.
The memo that we released on October 18 definitely responds to affordable housing issues within the Nexus studies directives that we initially put out to you.
Okay. In the Nexus study, could we have this spelled out? Can we have this responded to? I want to make sure that at least at this committee we're affording the opportunity to have all the different stakeholders' issues addressed in one form or another. And I would like to have that spelled out so that there's no doubt it's been responded to. You're stating it has been, they're saying it hasn't. Yeah. And so I want some clarity as to how we're doing it. But in particular, I wanted to be very clear and in terms of process, and perhaps, Mr. President, any more questions, Mr. Robles? No? Okay. Thank you, sir. And I'd like the USC representatives come on up. Mr. League, in listening to the council representative and their concern and their wish to keep this item in this committee until they're satisfied as to the issues being raised and how the Nexus study is being addressed, how do you respond to that?
We had a long working relationship with the council office, so some of this is new to us, but we fully want to engage.
Can you speak closer to the microphone? We can't hear you.
We had worked with the council office for many months on the Nexus study at the initiation of that to make sure we were inclusive and included the information per the council motion. You know, we will go back and try to cover the points that they've raised. I could commit that we can do that.
Well, I want to be emphatic as to the concern from the council office. It's our role, I believe, as committee to address the priorities of our council colleagues while maintaining a transparent process and how we look at the pressures from different points of view. But it's critical for us to understand that this notion of assurance, that there are assurances that the council office is participating at every level of this Nexus study is critical, and the fact that they pointed out that there have been areas that were not addressed in the Nexus study is a concern of ours.
Absolutely.
And so
I fully understand the concern, and we're committed to meet with the office and make sure we've met their concerns. We can do that.
Okay. What I'd like to do, colleagues, is continue holding this item here. And instruct the planning department to work with districts 1, 8, and 9, since the plan impacts these districts, and USC, of course, to ensure that the Nexus study provides a special needs assessment and gap analysis for the greater study area that addresses such things as shortage of affordable housing and other housing needs, police services, schools, park, and open space. So this is an example of items that I think are needed to be addressed, and I look forward to working with you and making sure that in Councilmember Park's district, since it's school is right in his district, that his concerns are being satisfied and that we are moving in a direction that allows for the policymaker to continue supporting this effort.
Yes.
I appreciate that very much, Mr. League.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, sir. Okay, so then we'll wait for a further date on this report, and we'll continue moving forward. Sir.
Mr. Chairman, would it be convenient to set a specific report date back so that everyone knows that they'll be coming back to this committee at a given date?
Well, the planning department, Councilor Krikorian is asking for a date by which we can target some kind of report back. Are you comfortable and ready to move a date, or how do you want to address that? Yeah.
Well, it's difficult to give it a date, but probably I would suggest that we meet with the concerned group at least one time, see, what type of information that they are looking from us, including the council office and probably Unidad, and see what direction they want us to. Then after that, I can probably pick a date.
What I'll do is, Councilman Krikorian, in respect to Councilman Parks, I'll speak to him to see when he feels his office is being addressed based on the priorities that they see in this study, and given their satisfaction, we can talk about a date, and I'll talk to their office about that. Thank you, sir. Okay, we're ready for the next item.
Next item, council members, is the proposed sign ordinance, and I believe the planning department will be discussing the schedule for the report backs.
Planning department staff. Our intention is to release the report on November the 18th, and then have it respond to all the report back items directed by the committee at its last hearing on the matter, and then have it before Plum on Tuesday, December the 6th.
Okay. That's pretty cut and dry. So we do have one speaker card. Barry Johnson.
Barry Johnson, Studio City stakeholder. In looking at this agenda, I just wanted to reiterate that there are 11 neighborhood councils that have submitted community impact statements. I believe, for the most part, those were submitted. They are all against, but for the reason being grandfathered sign districts. I'm concerned that, with all due respect, neither this committee or the planning department heard the nearly 60 out of 70 people who spoke here 2 weeks ago, mainly saying that we were against these grandfathered sign districts. And the reason primarily I think most of them were against them is they are surrounded by single-family residential homes as well as condominiums and apartments. And, when you move into a home, you just never fathom that one day you're going to have, Las Vegas-style glow in your backyard. And I don't think by grandfathering these, you're hearing what your community is saying and what people in this city are saying. I believe if you did a scientific survey, you'd probably have over 90% of the people in this city saying they do not want more signage, particularly signage that glows in their yards. So I left here 2 weeks ago very discouraged, and I'm still very discouraged because I don't think the people, the overwhelming majority, was heard. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Johnson. That ends public comment, so that will be directly for further date, and we can move on with this item, right? Okay. Roberto, next item.
Next item, council members, is a communication from the Cultural Heritage Commission. It's relative to the inclusion of the Evening Star Missionary Baptist Church as a historic cultural monument.
So before we start, the two speakers that are here, Keith and Williams, pastor, and Shanti Dudley, are you in support of this? Okay, this is a consent item. We're willing to say yes. If you're willing to say yes, then you don't need to speak. So, is it a consent, guys? I mean, we're okay? All right, so it's a consent item. We can move this forward. And thank you, sir. Thank you very much. We'll move this on. Next item, Roberto.
Next items, council members, are 6 and 7. I don't know if you want to take them together. They're interrelated. 7 is the appeal as to the environmental clearance, the MMD. The two appeals were submitted by Laura Mayers on behalf of the West Adams Heritage Association, and it relates to the construction of a grocery store and a proposed bank in CD10.
So we can take 6 and 7 together?
If that's your pleasure. Item 7 relates to the environmental appeal, and 6 relates to the zoning administrator's decision, the deputy advisory agency as it relates to the parcel map, and as to the specific plan permit adjustment.
City Attorney Fong, can we take both of them together?
Yes, you can take both together, but just make sure that you make separate decisions on each item.
Okay, so the same case, but different elements of the same case.
Correct.
Okay. Sir, so we'll take 6 and 7 together.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman. My name is Theodore Irving. I'm with the Planning Department. I'm here to present items 6 and 7. The project before you is an appeal of a 17,952 square foot commercial building with 71 parking spaces. It's on a 49,000 square foot site, and it's in the C2-1-CQ.5-R.15 zone. Again, as indicated, this project has a couple of entitlements, a parcel map modification, an approval of plans of a zoning administrator's action, and a director's determination, and an addendum of the reconsideration of the MND. As indicated, this is a revised project. The original project was approved by the South LA Area Planning Commission in 2008. That project was a 44,000 square foot project, and it included a number of discretionary actions of conditional use, zone variances, zone administrative determination, zone administrator's adjustments, and again, in environmental. In that 2008 case, it was also appealed of the MND. The central matter in that appeal in 2008 was the historic significance of a bank building. And that is part of what's before you today is, again, an appeal of that bank building. At that time, the APC approved our action sustaining the decisions of the Deputy Advisory Agency, sustained the decisions of the zoning administrator, and adopted the environmental. In effect, approving the MND, indicating that the historic building that they raised issues with at that time was not a historic building. Now, fast forwarding to 2011, the applicant was unable to move forward on the 44,000 square foot project, and they have subsequently revised the project, scaling down the project from 44,000 square feet to 17,952 square foot. When they submitted an application to us reflecting the change in that project, they submitted a parcel map modification. They submitted to us a plan approval for the adjustments to the zoning administrator action consistent with that revised project. And they also submitted a request to reconsider the environmental, again, so that all that is consistent with the revised project. In addition, they submitted a request for a director determination, which was appropriate at this time, because at the time in 2008, the specific plan was not adopted. And so they were required to get a director determination for project permit compliance for the new 17,000 square foot project. Planning issued the determination letters for the cost map modification, the plan approval, the director determination, and we reissued the reconsideration of the MND. After those letters were issued, we were contacted by Laura Myers, who indicated that some procedural errors were made and challenged us on our issuance of those determination letters. We took a step back and made a correction to our MND, which did not include the notification going out to several of the property owners and several of the interested parties. And so we recirculated or redistributed that recertification. We also recirculated the parcel map modification because we failed to send that out to some interested parties. Now, after those letters were issued, an appeal was filed by Laura Myers and the West Adams Heritage Association, and that appeal went to South LA APC. We advised South LA APC that the matter before them was a matter that of a project that had been revised, and that they heard this project in 2008, and what was before them are the changes or the reduction from the 44,000 square foot project approved in 2008 to the now 17,000 square foot project before them now. The South LA Area Planning Commission upheld the Deputy Advisory Agency's parcel map decision approving the 17,000 square foot project. They sustained the decision with regard to the zoning administrator's plan approval, and it sustained the Deputy Advisory Agency's, the director determination of the project permit compliance. And also again adopted the recertification of the environmental. Again, the core issue behind the environmental challenge is the significance of a building, and again, based on our studies, in 2008, when it was adopted, there was no significance at that time. We stood on top of that environmental in 2008 as we made the approvals of the modification, and so we stand on top of that right now. So that concludes my remarks.
Mr. Irving, there was also a 245 motion that was introduced on this matter, correct?
Yeah, let me clear that up for the record. What's before you is the 245 of this action. That relates to the parcel map decision, the zoning administrator's decision, and the director determination. Those are the matters that are only appealable up to the South LA Area Planning Commission and not further appealable to council. Therefore, council asserted Section 245 to have that matter brought before council. The MND, however, is further appealable to council, which is why that is a separate action. And so the appellants have chosen to go ahead and continue with the appeal of the MND, while the Council Office 10 has asserted Section 245 on the other related entitlements.
Okay, so you're addressing both appeals, correct?
Well, yes, we're addressing both of the appeals, or we're addressing both of the actions. The 245 is not technically appeal; it's just asserting jurisdiction over the appeal, and the M&D is an appeal all the way up to council.
Okay. Okay, that's 6 and 7. So we have with us the appellants. And that is Laura Myers. I'm sorry, can you come to the microphone?
Yes, I'm sorry. My name is Laura Myers. I'm representing West Adams Heritage. I am the appellant. However, my case is number 7 on your agenda, not number 6. You've just consolidated.
Both of them.
I understand, but we haven't heard what the council office has brought to you today. I don't know what to say. I have nothing in writing. I have no knowledge. I can't respond to a case that hasn't yet been presented. I can only address the MND. I don't think that's appropriate. If it would be okay to hear what changes have been offered, because this has changed every day for a week now.
Well,
I would have thought Theodore would have presented, and if he does...
Ms. Myers.
Yes. I know
Myers,
you're expiring my
please.
time.
Ms. Myers,
Yes, sir.
can you speak to your application?
I'm sorry.
You wrote...
I have
you
a letter
applied-
from our attorney.
Ms. Myers, if you allow me to finish.
Taking away my clock.
If you allow me to finish.
Mm-hmm.
Speak to this body about the content of your application when you filed your appeal.
Okay, that is fine. I'm representing, in 55 seconds, I'm representing West
Oh,
Adams.
no, you have more than 55. Don't worry about the clock. Don't stress out on the clock. Turn off the
Okay,
clock.
I'm sorry, I'm very stressed
Thank you.
today.
Okay, now let's
and
just
that
take a
is
deep breath.
because the project
Wait,
is
Ms. Harris,
changing.
let's take a deep breath.
Okay,
Let's
deep
turn
breath.
off the clock. The clock is off.
Okay, thank you very much. Do you need my address? 1818 South Gramercy Place, Los Angeles, 90019.
Welcome, Ms. Myers.
Thank you. And I'm speaking on behalf of West Adams Heritage Association.
Yes.
So I do want to take us back for a moment to the year 2008, and you'll understand where we are today. We did indeed appeal in 2008 on the similar issues, whether or not the Bank of Tokyo building, which is located on Jefferson on the corner of Bronson, on the easterly portion of this large merged parcel. We are convinced it is a historical building based on its association with the Japanese American heritage in this community of West Adams and Jefferson Park. At the Area Planning Commission in 2008, the applicant acknowledged that it might be culturally significant to the community and offered a voluntary mitigation of documenting the history, the heritage of Japanese Americans in Jefferson Park, creating a project which would have photos and documentation and history, and then presenting it somewhere. And we agreed to that voluntary mitigation, and that is why we didn't end up at Plum the last time. That is conveniently lost from the file. There's no evidence in any public file that that agreement took place at the Area Planning Commission in 2008, unfortunately. So the project was never built. The economy is poor. They've come back with actually a very good project to have a fresh and easy grocery store, a small version of the bank, and what was proposed is a lot of surface parking and the continued removal of the Bank of Tokyo building. We have been in negotiations and meetings and trying our best to come up with a solution that would both save the Bank of Tokyo building and allow this good grocery store to happen. But at the end of the day, 7 qualified historic consultants have written letters to the city in this 3-year period stating that this is a historic building. 2 qualified historic consultants, one has written a letter, Teresa Grimes, that's the original report, and within the last 7 days, apparently another qualified historic consultant has taken a different opinion. The letter that we're distributing is from our attorney on the board. Under CEQA, when experts disagree as to whether or not something is historic, there shall be an EIR to explore the alternatives. It's very clear that there's no agreement on whether or not this building is historic. This is not a whim. I would not have been able to file a 175-page appeal if this was a whim. You've got tons of information. Staff has not responded to any of it. Instead, they're citing a memo, I guess. I've seen it. A memo from Ken Bernstein from the Office of Historic Resources in 2008. They're citing it out of context, only half of it, and saying that is the reason the building's not historic. What Mr. Bernstein wrote in 2008 is that the Office of Historic Resources agrees with Teresa Grimes, consultant, that on an architectural basis, it does not rise to the level of significance, and that Tosh Terasawa, the architect, is not a master by the definition under National Register guidelines. However, they wrote, that they would welcome an HCM nomination based on its local cultural significance. That memo and letter, which they keep citing, is also not in any public file, has not been produced.
Ms. Meyer, so that's number 6, what you're speaking to?
I guess I'm speaking to number 7. Sorry. I can't speak to number 6. I don't know how they've revised the project. I have a problem.
Ms. Myers, on file, according to the CLA, you have 2 applications, appeals.
I do not. I have a single appeal. It's the MND number 7.
Right.
The M&D appeal that you see in the 245 would have come from Council District 10.
All right.
And,
so you have one on file, and the 245 is from the council office.
Correct. And I would love to be able to speak on that as soon, not as the appellant, but just, I guess, as a member of the audience, once we hear what they're actually proposing.
Okay, Ms. Meyer, so I'll go through the cards now.
Right.
And
So sorry.
Spoke your piece, and I want to make sure you have your time.
Right. So I have a few more things. We are frustrated by this process. I think everybody else is as well.
Okay.
It is inappropriate when staff advises a planning commission that it was not necessary for them to even consider the MND.
Okay.
I know you're frustrated too. Okay. Thank you.
I'm trying to be as thorough as possible. All right. So that's case for that. Thank you very much. Our next speaker is James Childs. And please put the clock back on. I'm sorry, James, just that you're not the appellant on record, so.
That's okay. I have 2 minutes right here.
2 minutes.
Jim Childs, 2326 Scar Street. I'm a professional, locally recognized historic preservation consultant and advocate. Ms. Teresa Grimes and myself were co-submitters for the successful designation of the North University Park National Register District, and I have the highest regard and respect for her ability and integrity. However, I find myself in disagreement with certain aspects of her historic assessment report for the Bank of Tokyo building, most specifically with her methodology and conclusions regarding criteria 1 and 2. Ms. Grimes' evaluations have overlooked the importance of the underlying historic cultural context of the Japanese-American community in the West Adams Jefferson Park neighborhood and the existing bank building's unique relationship with that cultural heritage. The undervaluing of the historic importance of those ethnic and economic development patterns have played in the evolution of West Adams is surprisingly common. All too often, historic assessments have focused on the architectural legacy of wealthy Anglo entrepreneurs and power brokers. The importance of the history of the West Adams African American community, for instance, has only recently been appreciated through the historic designations of such buildings as the Dunbar Hotel and the Golden State Mutual Building. The context of our rich West Adams historic cultural legacy should not be limited to the very rich who and the very grand Watt palaces. We must ensure that the who also includes racial groups, social movements, economic events, and the what recognizes gathering places, a structure's usage, and the populist icons. If the developers still wish to demolish this historic building, even though its retention does not directly impact their project, then an EIR must be drafted. Thank you very much.
Thank you,
I
Mr.
get another
Childs.
2 minutes on 6. This was 7.
No,
Was that it? That's okay.
You're doing really good. You've been here enough times, right? Thank you, Mr. Childs. We have with us Mitzi Mogul. Come on, Mitzi.
Good afternoon. Mitzi March Mogul. I'm a stakeholder and a qualified historic preservation consultant. Mine was one of the letters submitted to the city that referenced the historic nature of this building. The established process on this issue has been so violated that I am surprised that the city seems so willing to leave itself open to litigation on this. There is a lengthy and detailed argument to be made for the historic veracity of the Bank of Tokyo building, and that argument has been made in several letters, which the MND so conveniently ignores. And I would hope that if you have not had an opportunity to review those letters, that you would do so. It seems disingenuous at best for one cultural or ethnic group to so casually dismiss the heritage of another group. We are all part of the fabric of history, inextricably linked to one another. When we discount a group of people in order to benefit another, it is a slippery slope. To paraphrase the sage Hillel, by the time they came for me, there was no one left to speak for me. This is what I would call social amnesia. Every group has a right to be recognized, and every group and every citizen has a right to expect the process to work as it is laid out. That has not happened in this case. Everything about this has been bad. The building it should not need to be demolished. It doesn't need to be demolished because the project itself is considerably smaller and won't even be taking place. They're talking about demolishing a building for more surface parking. This is a city that talks an awful lot about environmentalism and environmental issues, and I think that should be taken into account as well in this regard. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Our next set of speakers, we have Tenora Thrash and Paul Turner. No applicant? Tenora Thrash? Yeah. You'd like to come on up now, or? Come on up. This is 6 and 7. Well, let me call up these speakers, and then you can decide how you want to speak.
I wanted to have the opportunity to be afforded the same opportunity as Ms. Myers, as the appellant, as the applicant response, and then everyone else can get 2 minutes.
Well, let's go ahead and speak, and we do have with us Paul Turner, Stevie Stern, and Philip Ong. So, please, and just keep an eye on the clock, but let's see how we can get you.
Thank you. Good afternoon. My name is Tenua Thrash, and I'm the Executive Director of the West Angeles Community Development Corporation and the developer of the site at Jefferson and Crenshaw. You've had an opportunity to hear from staff where we are as far as developing the site, and today we have approximately 23,000 square foot set of buildings that we'll be developing. As the developer, we understand the construction building process, but beyond that, we understand the community building process. Where we are today, the community has asked us to eliminate blight, and so we purchased a property from Bank of Tokyo in order to do that. The community of South Los Angeles has asked us to create jobs, and we have identified 2 credit national tenants to lease space in this site. The South Los Angeles community has asked us for better, healthy food choices, and we have identified a way to eliminate a food desert. They've also asked us for access to capital, for greater tax increment, and we have done that by the development of this project. On the other hand, the West Adams Heritage Association has asked us to activate the Crenshaw Corridor through our negotiations with the door there. We have done that. They have asked us to activate the project so we create public space off of the alleyway. We have done that. They have asked us to consider the historic nature of this building. We have done that by both doing an analysis by someone who's a professional, and we have done that by determining that we will go ahead and maintain a portion of the building, keeping up to approximately 5,000 square feet of the building. They have asked us to reduce parking on the site.
Can I ask you which portion of the building you're planning to keep?
We are maintaining the front half of the building, which sits right on Jefferson and 11th Avenue.
So it's the facade that's visible?
The facade of the building that's visible. The back end of the building is really just CMU concrete and houses the vault.
Does the facade that is apparent in your plan reflect some of the architectural and or historical elements that we heard of today?
So Ms. Myers had stated before, and she agrees with with the consultant on this, and that is, it's likely that the building itself is not quite historic, but there is some contention as to whether there's cultural significance. The building does not appear to have cultural significance, but you may think about it as far as it being built by a Japanese American as culturally significant.
So the piece that you're preserving
is the only piece of the building that has any architectural elements. The other portions of the building, which we don't have the pictures, is really just a concrete facade.
Okay, please go ahead.
So as you can see, all of the mitigations that have been asked, we have done and negotiated over the past few weeks. We did not have to be back here with the with the 245, Section 245, but in order to continue to move forward with the project, we decided to create more space other than the APC ruling to have an opportunity to preserve the building. So what we're asking today is that go ahead and remove in our entitlements our ability to demolish the building. We will maintain a portion of it. We'd like to bring back the parking variance on the project to allow us to have overflow off-site. And we've modified the project, and you have those plans in front of you that show that we're keeping the facade.
Thank you, Ms. Thresh. Okay, Paul Turner, Stevie Stern, and then Philip Ong. Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon. My name is Paul Turner. I'm a Board of Director for West Angeles Community Development Corporation, and for full disclosure, I'm President of the Los Angeles City Ethics Commission. Glad to be here today. I lament the fact that this building is not being demolished for the blight that it is. It is not historic. The Japanese American community believes it's not historic. Our experts believe it's not historic. The community believes it's not historic. And when they found out, the West Adams Gentrification Association found out that it wasn't architecturally historic, they came up with this bogus claim that it has cultural relevance when it does not. The West Adams Gentrification Association has no Japanese Americans on its board. We have two. The West Adams Gentrification Association has not preserved the Japanese American theater in the community, whereby we have. We have bent over backwards to appease this group. However, you have seen the irrationality of Ms. Laura Myers and our repeated attempts to negotiate with her. We cannot get through with them. So we have spent enormous amount of time, effort, sweat, and have gone through enormous funding that we have lost in trying to build this project on the corner of Jefferson and Crenshaw. We are a community-based association, organization, community development corporation that represents the interests of the community, the aspirations of the community, whereby the West Adams Gentrification Association, which seeks to do just that, gentrify through the back door of preservation. I'm highly offended by Ms. Missy's comments that this is just one group trying to get rid of the cultural relevance of another. We have done nothing but honor the legacy of the community, particularly the Japanese American legacy in that community, and I'm highly offended by their remarks and actions here today. So appreciate your support for this project. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Stevie Stern. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Thanks for the opportunity for us being here today. My name is Stevie Stern. I'm president of the United Neighborhoods Neighborhood Council. My address is 1710 Virginia Road, Los Angeles, 90019. In January of 2011, at our monthly governing board meeting, this project came before us. The neighborhood council voted not to support this project because the Bank of Tokyo building was going to be demolished to create surface parking, and the board found that this building has historic significance in our community, that a retail establishment was being created where its primary entrance was facing a parking lot as opposed to having an entrance on the sidewalk side, making it pedestrian friendly, which is supported in the UNNC urban design guidelines. And also that this project we wanted to ensure that it was meeting the following conditions of 17 previously approved and covenanted parking spaces would be made available for employees free of charge, and that its use by employees would be mandatory. I have since been in talks with the developer. I have not seen revised plans, but there has been talk about saving at least part of this building, and that there would be a door at the grocery store that could be used as an entrance. Just a couple things that I wanted to say is
I just
that...
need you to summarize, and we
Okay.
can finish.
This building, this property is not a blight. This bank has been in use. Jefferson Park HPOZ is now certified HPOZ. This architect has 2 other buildings within the HPOZ down on Jefferson. This building is not in the HPOZ,
Thank you, ma'am.
but is by that architect.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Philip Ong, our last speaker.
Hi, Council Member. I'm Philip Ong. I'm with the CIM Group. I sent an speaker card mainly for questions or any concerns that you have, but we've been working very closely with CD10 and WAHA to develop the plan that you have before you, which is SP15.
Are you working with the applicant?
I'm with the applicant.
So you're the architect for the applicant?
No, I'm not. I am with the developer, CIM Group.
You're with the developer?
Right, and our partner is CDC.
Okay, so this is more for technical questions?
Right.
Okay, thank you. Any questions for the gentleman? Seeing none, thank you, sir. We have with us Sylvia Lacey from the council office. Ms. Lacey?
Good afternoon. My name is Sylvia Lacey, and I'm the district director for Councilmember Herb Wesson. First, I want to thank CIM West Angeles and the community and WAHA for working together to come up with what I hope will be a satisfactory resolution to this project, and we can move forward. We concur with the changes that Tanua Trash asked for about the parking variance and the front door. We're fine with that. On the building, the Union Bank Tokyo building, the current design that is being presented today that we hope you will adopt preserves the front portion of that building. That is the portion of the building that WAHA, West Angeles, SIM, and the council office all agreed if there's any architectural significance to the building, it lies there in that front portion. They have agreed to retain that portion of the building, thus reducing the parking lot from 71 to 64. I am not sure how to guarantee that that portion of the bank building will not be demolished by another developer or by, infest with Lotus, but that is the goal of WAHA, to somehow be able to have a guarantee retention of the building, even though the site plan, and if we make it a condition of approval, then it has to be like that. I don't know if through Plum we can do a plan approval, because I know it's done in conditional use permit sometimes. If that can be done, a 2-year, 3-year plan approval, guaranteeing that the site will look like it does, I don't know if that's possible.
So you're saying regardless of who the owner is, to memorialize the building and keep it in its historic state in perpetuity?
The agreed upon front portion of the building, I want to be sure that is crystal clear, because whatever you decide today, adopted by council tomorrow, will be left up to the interpretation of building and safety. And I don't want building and safety to interpret it in some other manner than it was intended.
Okay, that's...
a tall order.
Now we're talking about subjectivity and building and safety, which takes us to a whole other place. Let's do this. So if I'm hearing you correctly, you want us to deny the sequel appeal,
yes,
if I'm hearing you correctly, and to essentially, on the 245, we should grant in part and deny in part the appeal, subject to revised conditions submitted by the planning department and revised and elevation plans which you support as a council office.
Yes.
And would that be the appropriate action, Roberto, if that covers everything?
And you know what, there's one other thing, there's a condition,
Yes.
Condition of approval that says something about demolition, that needs to be removed.
Okay, let's do this. We can act on these two items if you're in agreement with these two actions. And then by the time it gets to council tomorrow, the council member could present any other language that he feels captures the consensus of the two groups as you define it.
13 or 18?
Are you comfortable with that?
I'm comfortable with that.
Okay, so we can keep it moving. You can work with the council office, your technicians, if you will, and the planning department and those that are involved in the discussion. Whatever language you come up with for council, we can adopt it based on this action. Is that okay?
That works.
Okay, so we will essentially, our first act would be to essentially deny the secret appeal, and the second is to move in part and grant in part, to grant in part, deny in part the appeal subject to revised conditions submitted by the planning department and the council office with revised site and elevation plans, which is submitted by the council office. Is that okay?
Okay, yes.
Are we okay, colleagues? All right.
Councilman, as to the question as to the plan approval and whether that could be conditioned, perhaps Mr. Irving can speak to that?
We're talking about the plan approval for the ZA plan approval?
Right. I think as Lacey mentioned that the structure would be maintained as is, and in the future it will not be altered. Can that be done as a condition?
So I think we should just take some time to kind of separate the
Right.
actions, because not all of the actions apply to the buildings, specifically the director determination. The director determination does not apply to the bank building because the bank building is outside of the specific plan. So we cannot take any action as suggested by Ms. Lacey here relative to the director determination as it relates to that building because it's outside of the area. So for the director determination, my recommendation is that we sustain the director determination's actions as it were, because again it has no bearing on the bank building. And there was some language that came out of the APC discussion that talks about the orientation of that building, and we'll have that language because we got that out of the APC. We incorporate that language into the direct determination about the frontage of the building along Jefferson and Crenshaw. So that's the direct determination. Moving to the zoning administrator's action, okay, that plan amendment was strictly about a loading area. So again, we could simply say that we will uphold the decision of the zoning administrator's action as it relates to the plan approval and keep that in place. So the only thing that's remaining that really ties us to what they're requesting is a parcel map. And we can say that the parcel map be granted in part and denied in part, and granted with the conditions that have been presented here this evening. And that ties us to a site plan, okay, and a set of elevations which I think may be presented.
Okay. Okay, so that allows for clarity and action for the council to consider, and now we can
move
take
forward.
the plan of vote in council, but we can move this on.
We have all three of those items separated, and only the applicable conditions apply to the applicable project.
So we can move it on from committee from given that language, correct?
Yeah, we'll bring that to council tomorrow, that language.
Are we comfortable with that, Councilmember and staff? Yeah?
Yes.
All right. So that's, I think we're all in agreement, and we'll move with that action. Have a second? Okay. And that's a full committee support.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, ma'am. All right. So that takes care of that issue. Roberto, anything else?
Public comment.
Anybody have a public comment? Seeing none, this meeting is adjourned.